We are on February 17th, or day 48 of 365 days of walking through the Bible alphabetically. And today's devotion is called Keep Our End of the Bargain. Now, your morning rinse for today is Deuteronomy 4 through 7. I'm not going to lie, this is a long morning rinse. It's got 4 long chapters. So you want to take probably about 20 to 30 minutes of reading time, or if you listen to it audibly and you increase the speed a little bit, then that will help. But I'm just saying it's a little bit more of a lengthy morning rinse than normal. Now the featured verse, now that you're back from reading, it's Deuteronomy 7:12. Then it shall come about, because you listen to these judgments and keep and do them, that the Lord your God will keep with you his covenant and his loving kindness, which he swore to your forefathers. So today's morning rinse, you are probably going to stand in agreement with this, that it is full of warnings about when someone chooses to not obey God. It even recaps the 10 Commandments and goes through all these various scenarios and things to do, not to do, that kind of stuff. And granted, some of the rules that we read must be taken into context based upon the culture and the time frame when these passages were written. Keeping that in mind, regardless of the timing and regardless of the culture, God still has one standard for everyone, and that standard is to love and obey him and to love others. I grew up in a really strict household. In fact, I am going to have my dad on here as a guest February 21st, and we're going to talk about some of my upbringing and some of my, the strict rules that were over our family. And so keep in tune, because that will be a very good podcast. But he was very strict, and he admittedly will say that. And there were times that I did not like the rules that my parents set in place for us at that time. And admittedly, there were some times when I misunderstood the rules even. But for the most part, I complied, understanding the context of why my parents set the standard that they did. And I was a pretty straight and narrow kiddo for the most part. In our personal journey of faith, we can often clearly see the big picture of what God has set in place. But speaking from experience, there are also times when our flesh will ignore God's viewpoint. Regardless of our personal desires or our depth of understanding God's standards for our lives, our obedience to him is in direct relation with our responses to them. So those responses to his laws listed in today's chapters really boil down to loving him with our whole entire heart and soul. And while a lot of these rules that were set in place, the main message is to love God with our whole heart and our soul. And he loves us, and he is a jealous God who is very serious about how we display that love to others. So when we look at the rules and the commandments in our morning rinse, it can be easy to focus on those seemingly bigger sins, like thou shalt not murder and lying and stealing. But what about those ones that are not necessarily so offensive, or what we view as little sins, or maybe sins that people can't see publicly? Because that's so oftentimes, we look at sins, and if we can see what somebody is doing wrong, then apparently it can seem bigger than the little ones that we might have hidden in our own hearts. There's little sins, I guess is what you would call it. But like in chapter 5, verse 21, he talks about secretly coveting. You shall not covet your neighbor or desire your neighbor's house or his field, or etc. I mean, when we secretly covet other people or get jealous, that breeds that seed of jealousy, and it can then spur to bigger things that we end up hoping that there will be wrongdoing to these people. I mean, it can lead to bigger things that could affect our lives, their lives, whatever. What about chapter 7, verse 26? It's keeping ungodly things in our home. And I think in the scripture, it uses the word abominable. What if there's things in your home that might for sure be ungodly, like music that is as absolutely not for God, you know? There's a lot of music out there that has lyrics that are just complete opposite of what God would want us to put into our spirits. And so, you know, there's things that we can tangibly do that might not necessarily be exactly what the Deuteronomy scriptures in that time portray, but there's things that we can do now. You know, we cannot expect God to continuously be the God of blessings if we do not obey him. I mean, I'm reminded of what my husband told our kids when we were raising them. He would often say, and he still will sometimes bring this up as kind of a comedic sort of little thing, but all our kids know this saying. It's every decision, whether good or bad, has a consequence. We choose the type of consequence that we receive based upon our choices and our decisions. And we can't expect God to hand us this silver platter with all the goods in life when we refuse to surrender our whole heart to him. I think that that's the main message of Deuteronomy, and especially in these early chapters, is really obeying God. And Moses had a voice in that, and he was sharing that voice with him. So today's challenge to dig deeper is to really look and see if there are any areas in our lives that are not totally surrendering to God. And maybe you've got some bitterness towards someone, or you haven't let something go, or, you know, maybe somebody has done something to you that was offensive or maybe not up to par, and it hurt your feelings, and, you know, you're having to struggle with getting past it. Search really deep. You know, there might be some deep things in there, even if it's years past. Search deep for those things. Surrender and pray during the day today. You know, if it comes to mind, and if you're praying and asking God, is there anything in my heart that might need to be surrendered? Then just ask him throughout the day. Ask him about that. And if he gives you a little nudge about something that comes to mind, ask God to strengthen you in those areas. You know, ask God to let things go and forgive that person who did you wrong, or bring unity. You know, ask God to help you bring unity. When we are asking God for these things, the help in those areas, remember, you are an overcomer. You can do this. So speak death over any area in your heart, any sin, even the small ones. And in your evening reflection, pull out your journal, whatever journal that is, whether it's the companion journal that goes with my devotional or your own journal, but write down the changes that you made today to start afresh, to rinse your soul, to redefine your walk, and to keep your end of the bargain. You know, this is a trade-off. We, again, cannot expect God to hand us, you know, all of these blessings if we are not obeying him. And so let's keep trying to mold our hearts, refine our spirit, redefine that those moments. And we can do this. We can get better every day by obeying God and loving him, and ultimately loving others and loving ourselves. I hope today encouraged you and just really challenged you to, hey, is there any area in my life that I want to take it a notch or 2 or 5 up? And God will help you with that. And so I'm hoping that you were encouraged today. And please join my Facebook group. I have a Rinse, Reflect, Repeat devotional Facebook group where oftentimes I will post my podcast once in a while, and some people will write their insights into the Facebook group. Please go ahead and do that, because you never know who in the group is going to be really encouraged by your insight and what God has shown you. Also, if you haven't bought the devotional and the companion journal, the links are in my show notes, as well as you can go to anitacordell.com and get the links there. And so you can apply God's truths every single day. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating.